Thank you, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We're so excited for today's English Learner Consortium. Good morning. Buenos dias. My name is Vanessa Aramayo, and I am the Executive Director at Alliance for Better Community. Together with Californians Together, CalTOG, we co-chair the consortium, and we're accompanied by 6 remarkable and wonderful advisory members: the California Community Foundation, Asian Americans Advancing Justice, the Education Trust West, Early Edge California, Unidos US, Loyola Marymount University Center for Equity and for English Learners. It's a remarkable committee, and ABC is honored to be able to work with them on the consortium and English learner success. As many of you know, the Consortium for English Learner Success is composed of nearly 100 civil rights, policy, research, philanthropic, educator, and community-based organizations that are all working together to strengthen the prosperity of California and Los Angeles County by advocating for an educational system that fully supports the needs and embraces the assets of English learner students and dual language learners. The creation of the consortium could not have been made possible without the support and thought partnership of the California Community Foundation, the Gates Foundation, and the Sobrato Family Foundation. Valerie Cuevas, who is here with us today, has been a huge and a big part of that. She's been a tremendous thought partner. She is also the Senior Program Officer at the California Community Foundation. Valerie directs the CCF education programs and leads a dedicated grant-making team, developing and scaling removing barriers to evidence-based approaches that support the whole learner from birth to K-12 to post-secondary. With the expertise in educational equity, state legislative policy, and K-12 governance, Valerie was most recently led the education grant-making strategy at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. She joined the philanthropic sector after a tenure with the Education Trust West, where she focused on public policy advocacy and program work that improved educational outcomes for all students pre-kinder through college. Additionally, she served as an education policymaker for 6 years as a publicly elected 2-term school board member. She served as president of the West Contra Costa Unified Board of Education, a middle-sized urban Bay Area school district serving approximately 30,000 children, 75% of whom are English learners, low income or foster youth. Valerie is a proud product of California's public education system and a staunch advocate for kids. It's my pleasure to welcome Valerie Cuevas it's my pleasure to join Valerie Cuevas and have her share some opening remarks. Val?
Oh, thank you, Vanessa. Hopefully everybody can hear me this morning. Welcome to the end of September. We're about to start October, if everybody can believe it. You know, I appreciate all the background introduction, Vanessa, but most of that stuff I share only because I know that it makes my parents smile, and I like making my parents smile. And so we know that the success of our families is really invested in the success of our children. And at this moment in time, as we enter a new school year after a month or so, in 2022, some of the biggest trends that are really of concern include: what is it going to take to accelerate learning for our most vulnerable students, particularly English learners? Coming out of the pandemic, we have early indicators, particularly some of the NAEP trends that demonstrate that English learners in particular have been perhaps the most disproportionately impacted by the interruption that the pandemic caused to their access to high quality educational opportunities. So that is why this consortium and the work that the consortium does is so important, because we continue to highlight not just what is the needed nexus between practice, policy, and advocacy, but most importantly, that we remain a strong voice for communities and parents and students in particular who are in fact experiencing our need for support. Today, I know we're going to highlight in particular what one of those particular research-based, evidence-based best practices for accelerating student success, and that is, of course, early access to early learning opportunities, particularly UPK and TK. So we're excited to have that. We know that as a community of funders, of practitioners and educators, of policy thinkers and advocates and parents and families, the most important thing we can do is really share what are the best ways that we can in fact stay focused and speak with one voice around what it's going to take to accelerate student learning. So with that, I just want to welcome everybody. to another convening for the consortium as a funder and advisory committee of this consortium. We're excited to always be in partnership, and thank you to our philanthropy friends who are here as well, who continue to be in partnership too. So with that, I'll turn it over back to Vanessa.
Thank you, Valerie. We are truly fortunate for the support on behalf of CCF, the Sobrato Foundation, the Sobrato Philanthropies and the Gates Foundation. So thank you for your continued support and the thought partnering in being able to get here today. About today's agenda. So before I get into the goals for the consortium, I do want to share a little bit more about what to expect this morning. The advisory committee hopes that during today's convening, you will learn about the universal PK and TK expansion in California, receive an update on the most recent report published by Californians Together and LMU's Center for Equity for English Learners, review policies that affect English learners at the local, state, and federal levels, and lastly, identify and prioritize opportunities for collaboration between one another and strategize on ways to advance the success of all EL and DLL students in the policy or grassroots organizing committees. The goals of the consortium, we have many of you that are returning participants that are joining us today. Thank you. It's wonderful to see you all again. But we also have a good number of folks who are joining for the first time. So for the first timers, welcome. We promise this will be painless, and we hope that this will be very, very beneficial to you and the work that you are doing. We are excited to have you join, whether this is your first time or whether you've been meeting with us since 2019, some of you in 2018. In order to make sure that we are all on the same page, I do want to take time to provide a quick recap of the goals of the consortium. You'll see on this next slide our original goals and priorities. The consortium first came together in 2019 with 6 key goals. Influence and shape the policy narrative to reflect the diversity, assets, and strengths of English learners. Create alignment and synergy between policy, practice, and research in Los Angeles and statewide. Institutionalize and document new knowledge regarding successful school and district-wide educational practices in the network. Centralize research, practice, and policy resources, as well as diversify the representation of EL advocates and engage the broader Los Angeles community, including policymakers, advocates, parents and families, researchers, philanthropy, and practitioners on our priorities for all English learner success. The focus of the consortium for EL success is to improve educational access, quality, and outcomes for ELs and DLLs in Los Angeles County and California. Today, we are excited to continue to work together on prioritizing English learners and dual language learners in Los Angeles and throughout the state. We hope that you have time in the breakout rooms and in future work group meetings to connect with one another about the amazing work you are all leading. Our collective aim is to develop a strong bridge between legislative experts and the community to achieve greater equity for DLLs and ELs. We have seen the benefit of coming together in the space like this one to connect on what is happening with our ELs in Los Angeles and to help push for real, positive, lasting change. In a pre-pandemic world, we came together in a variety of ways. We came together in large consortium meeting spaces like this one and through smaller working groups that really helped to push the areas of focus for this collective work. We also heard from parents and partners through listening sessions outside of our usual meeting spaces. All of the small and large meetings led us to develop and finalize policy values that continue to guide the work of the advisory today. We released a policy agenda to highlight key issues of equity impacting students in California. It offered legislative recommendations in an effort to improve the educational access, quality, and outcomes of ELs and DLL students in California. 6 values were elevated prior to the pandemic that we still today continue to prioritize. Value 1, close opportunity gaps. Value 2, equitable access to course, college, and career opportunities. Value 3, fully equipped teachers. Value 4, asset-based approach to DLL and EL education. Value 5, EL diversity, typology, and the whole child approach. And finally, value 6, access and funding for biliteracy programs. While much has happened since the policy agenda was released in 2020, the overarching goals of the policy agenda remain relevant. We hope that our values from the policy agenda will continue to connect us in this work on the latest research, policies, and practices. We also hope that throughout the presentations today, you will have an opportunity to think about how you can best engage with one another outside of this meeting space. I also want to provide a little bit of context setting. The biggest challenge in many justice moments is the connection between policy and grassroots organizing and mobilization, as many of you here today know. We are in a period of evolution. The pandemic created barriers to work together and meet in person, but it did not slow us down from what's next and what those future steps are. Our students need us now more than before. Distance learning and time outside of the classroom has impacted our students in ways that we don't yet fully understand. It's important for us that our policy priorities continue to move to address the changing needs of our students, but it's also imperative that we move in this direction by keeping both policy and organizing, which requires community voice to continue to be center in the conversations when we're talking about solutions. Later this morning, we will spend time in 2 work groups. This time is intended for us to really connect on our overlapping work and plan out how we can accomplish common goals in this space by also examining different options for engagement. We're conveniently organizing the policy groups in a way that covers both local and state policy. Our community organizing work group will also be aware of the local and state policies impacting ELs, but together we'll come up with ways to mobilize others for change in the name of improving the lives and educational outcomes of our ELs and DLLs. It is important that we continue to engage diverse educational partners and stakeholders. And we hope that throughout this meeting, you can begin to think of who else you can invite to this fairly large table or Zoom screen to help move this work forward. There is a need for diversity that's represented here. And we have district leaders, advocates, organizers, community leaders, parents, and philanthropy, just to name a few. The vision of this consortium is to effectively mobilize locally and statewide, and in that mobilization, provide positive impact for our students. As policy opportunities evolve, we need to be ready to respond in the ways we know how to do best. Some of us will do that through direct advocacy, by setting up meetings with our local representatives. Some of us will do it through grassroots organizing, like setting up a phone bank or marching. Others will do that through showing up and running an amazing program for ELs in their district. Or you might do that in a unique and different way that we have yet to think about. That is why it is important that we are all here together working towards that same goal. We look forward to being back together in this space again. We know it's very important. This is a very important time for all our students, but particularly for our ELs and DLLs. We hope you are excited to join us during this new part of our evolution, and we welcome you. Now I will hand the virtual mic over to my colleague, Carolyn Corlett, who will lead the next section of the agenda. Carolyn Corlett is the Policy Director at Early Edge, California, and she has brought a panel together that will shine a light on what our practitioners and leaders are doing in real time for our students. Carolyn?
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to have you here with us this morning. And although our name is Consortium for EL Success, a big part of our work is also supporting dual language learners who represent nearly 60% of children birth to age 5 in California. California is also the home to the largest population of dual language learners in the nation. So always thinking about what we can do to best meet their needs before they enter the K-12 system. And right now is a very exciting time for dual language learners in California and for ECE as well. And so we wanted to start, before we move into our great panel, we wanted to start with some policy updates related to early childhood and dual language learners that are happening in California. So the first item that we wanted to talk about is around AB 1363, which is the next slide. And so AB 1363 is a bill that Early Edge sponsored with our partners for identification of dual language learners in state preschool programs. And we're so excited that the bill was signed and is now moving into implementation. And this is making California the first in the nation to identify dual language learners in an assets-based way, really recognizing the opportunity for them to become bilingual and biliterate and the opportunity to support their home language. So I wanted to just share an update on where things are with the implementation of the bill. So the California Department of Education recently released guidance for implementation, and the implementation will begin January 1st, 2023. So we can share also in the chat these links, and we'll also be sharing with you the deck after the meeting. Also, this work is receiving national attention. New America wrote a blog on the bill and its implementation that you should definitely check out. And then also the next steps are the Department of Education is planning a training for the field before the end of the year so that folks can get ready for implementation on January 1st. So we're very excited about this opportunity so that, before this, there was no uniform way of identifying dual language learners. So now the teachers will have the information that they need about their children's background, and the state will have the data to really support children. This is the goal of the identification, is to support through teacher training, dual language programs, bilingual materials, bilingual staff, etc. So we're really excited about this and looking forward to seeing how the implementation rolls out. And then the next item that we wanted to provide an update on is Universal Transitional Kindergarten. So this is also a very exciting time. California is on its way to having universal preschool for all 4-year-olds in California. And so this last budget cycle, $611 million was included in the budget to expand transitional kindergarten. So before, only children born between September 2nd and December 2nd were eligible. And so now with this additional funding, we're able to expand and allow younger children to attend transitional kindergarten. So the expansion of transitional kindergarten is going to happen in a phased approach over several years. So this is the first year of implementation. So now this year, children born between September 2nd and April 2nd are eligible to participate in transitional kindergarten. And the plan is for next year, children born up to June 2nd, and then the following year until September 1st. So this is very exciting. And then another item that is critical that was included in the state budget is funding to reduce the teacher-child ratio. So before this year, there were 24 children in a classroom with 1 adult, which, when children are 4 years old, they really need a lot of attention and individualized support. So we're excited that with the funding that was included in the budget, now the ratio is 12-1. So for a classroom with 24 students, there are 2 adults in the classroom that can support the children, and with a maximum class size of 24. So we're really excited about this opportunity, and our panel today will be talking about how we can really focus on the needs of dual language learners as part of our expansion of transitional kindergarten and universal preschool. I also wanted to mention a wonderful resource that our organization Early Edge developed. It's a website called tkcalifornia.org. And it includes wonderful resources and information to support teachers and administrators with implementation of TK. And then the final item that we wanted to provide an update on is around the preschool through 3rd grade credential. So with the expansion of universal TK, California is going to need about 11,000 teachers or more to fill these TK classrooms by 2025. So this is a huge need. And because of this, the state is really looking to support this increased demand for TK teachers, as well as create a long-term workforce pathway for the ECE field. So for the past several months, the Commission on Teacher Credentialing has been developing this preschool through 3rd grade specialist credential, which really aims to build upon the educator's existing competencies and experiences working in either early learning or elementary education, and to provide a credential that would prepare them to teach in preschool through 3rd grade settings. So we wanted to provide a status on where things are with this credential. So the Commission on Teacher Credentialing approved the establishment of the credential this past summer. And then currently the CTC staff is drafting regulations for the teacher performance expectations, as well as the standards, which are going to be presented to the commission at its October meeting. So this is also exciting work that's happening. So we'll continue to provide updates as it gets moving forward. So those are kind of the updates that we had related to early learning and dual language learners. So again, very exciting time. And now we're going to be moving into our panel. So we're very excited to have with us today. We have a very, again, as I mentioned, this is a very unique and exciting time with the expansion of universal preschool. And then again, that given that dual language learners represent more than half of the children birthed to age 5 in California, it really is critical that we think about how to prioritize their needs in our expansion and how we can best support them and really set them up for success as they transition to K-12. And so as we mentioned, this is the first year of expansion. So the expansion is really just getting underway. But we are so fortunate to have with us today a group of leaders who are models in the state for really centering dual language learners in their universal preschool and TK expansion. So I wanted to introduce the panelists that we have with us this morning. So we have Tricia Ringel, Director of Elementary Education from Santa Clara Unified School District. We also have Darcy Spicer, Early Learning Specialist from the Early Education and Expanded Learning Department from Westminster School District. We also have with us Dean Tagawa, Executive Director of Early Learning for Los Angeles Unified School District. And we also have Bernadette Pilar Zermeño, who's the multilingual specialist and also pre-K, TK dual language coach for Oakland Unified School District. So just want to say thank you so much for our panelists for joining us this morning and for sharing their wonderful experience and expertise and their work that they're doing to expand transitional kindergarten and preschool and really support dual language learners. So we'll ask some questions to the panelists and then we'll open it up for Q&A at the end of the panel. So if you do have questions, please include them in the chat and then we'll get to them after we hear from the panelists. So our first question is for Dean. Dean, can you tell us about your dual language program expansion beginning in pre-K and TK, and also share some lessons learned and how you work to ensure that there are pathways for children to continue on their bilingual trajectories in elementary school and beyond?
Sure. Well, Carolyn, thank you. And good morning to everybody. I hope that everyone out there is doing well on this kind of thoughtful Thursday. And as Carolyn mentioned, I'm the executive director for All Children 3 Feet and Under in LA Unified, is the kind of the way we put it. They're about the same size as me, so it works out really well. But kind of to get to kind of your questions, I think what we've learned about our dual language expansion beginning in pre-K and TK, we did a combination. We opened with our programs in our early ed centers, dual language, our state preschool programs, as well as our TK. And at the time we called it expanded TK programs. And one of the questions I always asked was, we have this pretty extensive dual language program, but why wasn't it in early ed? And so one of the things we know that kids, when they start earlier, it's much better. For me as an adult, continuing to learn Spanish and developing my Spanish skills, it's harder, right, than when I was a kid. And so even starting to learn Spanish in middle school and high school, I always wondered why we didn't start earlier. So it was a combination of things. We were able to get a couple of the board members to really work with us on writing a resolution to open early education programs, dual language programs in our youngest grades, and really to start that work. So about 6 years ago, we got the resolution passed. And from that time, we were able to partner with Early Edge, Sobrato, Long Beach Unified, and different groups to help us, and within our own multicultural, multilingual education division, to start putting this work together. So I think at the beginning, there were, we started with 13 programs, and now we're up to 39 programs. And so we have programs in English, Spanish, Korean, Chinese, and Armenian. So it's continuing to grow. And I think the big thing when we talk about, I'm going to say, pathways for our kids and for our families and those trajectories into elementary school and beyond, some of the learnings that we felt were really, really important is we wanted the kids to have a learning pathway to continue the dual language. So we looked at schools where there were existing programs. We looked at our early education centers. Was an elementary school nearby? Did they have a dual language program? And then those elementary schools, did they have feeder patterns to middle and high school? Because ultimately, the goal is to get these kids started early, but to graduate with the seal of biliteracy. And so that was kind of the trajectory, and we started learning about it, making sure that the kids had places to go at each step to develop those language skills. We also learned just involving the parents was huge. You know, there were a lot of misconceptions around dual language. We wanted to make sure we addressed those up front, made sure parents had the understanding of what the program was, how it benefited their kids. And we see it in our DRDP data. Our kids who are in our dual language programs are outperforming our kids that aren't in the dual language program. We learned not to rush the trainings. I mean, we took 1.5 to 2 years with each cohort of teachers and paraprofessionals. We wanted to make sure the paras in the classroom, as well as the teachers, had the skills and the strategies they needed to develop the skills and language, especially the spoken language strategies within the classrooms. And then I want to say the last thing we really learned was that we learned how to do better coaching with our teachers. We have a very small staff within the division, but we really focused on coaching teacher to teacher. And I think that was a big piece. And then every new cohort, we brought the old cohort back to also help. And one, it provided a twofold thing. It helped them to kind of refresh their skills, but it also gave the new incoming cohort a group of teachers that they could connect with. So whether it was on our own learning platform through something we call Schoology, to be able to share their lessons, to be able to share their pictures and different things, I think those were all kind of big pieces. So those are kind of some of the things that and then I'll stop, Carolyn, because I could go on and on about it, because it's just an amazing program. Yeah.
No, thank you. We love hearing about it, and it definitely is amazing. And actually, my own child is in one of the programs, so very happy about that as well. So just recognizing that, this wonderful work that they're doing, and that we have this unique opportunity with TK expansion to begin our dual language programs as early as TK or even earlier, and then think about how we can continue with the pathways. And so Dean's program at LAUSD is a great model for that, and how they were so thoughtful in developing this program and finding, feeder patterns and ensuring that children have the opportunity to continue their pathway and eventually receive their state seal of biliteracy upon high school graduation. And now with the state's new bilingual pathway recognition awards, children can start receiving these awards as early as preschool, TK, kindergarten, and really support their bilingual trajectory. So thank you so much for sharing, Dean. And then our next question is for Bernadette. Bernadette, can you share a little bit about the work that you're doing in Oakland to support multilingual learners through your TK expansion? And then also, I know that you have a strong emphasis on family engagement. So can you share a little bit about what you found most effective in supporting multilingual children and their families?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Buenos dias. Bonjour. It's an honor, pleasure to be here. I just see so many wonderful faces. We're all doing great work. So thank you. And currently, as we know, Oakland has always had transitional kinder. We have since the very beginning, and now with this expansion, and also a shout out to the multilingual toolkit. If you haven't seen it, it is an amazing resource for pre-K through third. So we have been using the multilingual toolkit as a guide, as kind of this pathway to support us along these very strategic research-based evidence to really ensure that every single PD that we are doing, every single training professional learning community always has those multilingual toolkit strategies within them. So with the support of the state, we have been hired, and Dean probably knows, we have been able to have multiple coaches. So we in OUSD are calling them super coaches, to where they're coming in, they're looking not just at the curriculum or not just at social emotional development, we're looking at multilingual learners. What are the strategies being in place? Where do we need a little bit more support? We're looking at curriculum development, social emotional development, inclusion development, the DRDP learning. So as coaches, we're going into the pre-K and TK sites and trying to align as much as possible. Also within, as I said, within each of the professional development PLCs, we have photos, like uplifting best practices. And just as we want asset-based with our children and our families, we also want that asset-based lens with our teachers. We know that teachers may have been doing this for centuries. So how do we uplift those practices to really make them shine? So we have photos, we have gallery walks, we focus on, again, those best strategies, not just for multilingual learners, but for all learners. We know that visual schedules are going to help our kids from pre-K all the way up to high school. OUSD Oakland has lots of newcomers. So visual schedules within that multilingual toolkit, we're always talking about visual schedules. Visual schedules aren't just going to help our little ones, they help the newcomers up all the way up to high school. We also use lots of like sentence frames, intentional messages, and we really, really want to bring in our families, our coaches, our children as much as possible. One of, just for example, and Carolyn mentioned it with the pre-K through third credential, we have a PLC that happens monthly where we have, it's so like, you could just see my passion because this is the first time within OUSD where we have pre-K teachers all the way up to third grade collaborating together. And we had an event last night and we were talking about songs and chants. And again, it's from the multilingual toolkit, how powerful songs and chants are. So we had the pre-K teachers developing songs and chants and then going all the way up to third grade in the same school. And as those, we know early childhood, sometimes it's kind of a silo, like who are the pre-K teachers on our site? Like, what do they do? Like under 3 feet. I love that, Dean. So like, how do they work with them? So actually creating those community spaces led by coaches, led by teachers, builds leadership and also that alignment from pre-K third that we want to build towards. So the upper grades were like, okay, we did songs and chants. Now, how do we do that sentence patterning? How do we begin that writing and reading that we need for the upper grades? So that's just one of the many things that we're doing within OUSD, always looking at asset base and really shifting that mindset. I think Dean and Carolyn talked about this. Our parents, and we know this, maybe our own parents and historically are like, nope, we are here to learn English. Only English, talk, sing, read, English, English, English. And like, how do we shift that mentality for parents, right? Like, yes, talk, sing, read in Spanish or Arabic or Armenian, whatever language you speak at home is very important. So we have monthly family events where the goal is asset-based, do your home language. One of the parents was basically was like, wow, you're not just talking about Spanish, you're talking about Korean, you're talking about Hmong, you're talking about Mandarin. So we have sing-alongs, the parents love them and the kids do too. So we have sing-alongs in multiple languages where parents are actually like, oh, my home language is now important. Like I see it, like the school is providing that. We have this texting program within OUSD to really support our families where we send out like talk, sing, read to your child in your home language. It's called Fast Talk, if anyone knows of it. And it has very specific evidence-based strategies pulled from the multilingual toolkit again of things that you can do at home that really support the little ones. And we are creating as many opportunities for parents to share voice, because parents are the experts. So you come in and sing your song, you come and share how you're helping at home with homework. And lastly, I think we all know that the Biliteracy Pathways Awards is amazing. It's lived in kinder all the way up to high school, but what is it going to look like in pre-K? So this year, our whole team is focusing on really looking at that Biliteracy Pathways Award for pre-K. And that might be your older sister is reading to you in Arabic. Yes, you get an award, right? Like really shifting that asset base, like really understand and like having parents understand the importance of that home language, because we know oral language then develops into reading and writing. So as much as possible. And just if anyone is doing the Pathways Awards in pre-K, love to connect and look at what it can look like within OUSD. We have over 300 students. 80% of them are multilingual. So it's going to be a fun adventure. Thank you so much, Carolyn and everyone.
Thank you so much, Bernadette. And actually our fellow panelists, many of them are doing the pathways beginning in pre-K, so definitely can connect with what that can look like. And thank you so much for sharing all the work that you're doing around family engagement and really helping families understand the importance of the home language, the importance of speaking the home language, that really is the foundation for developing English and all of the benefits of bilingualism. And actually for AB 1363 implementation, that's one of the key goals of the identification process, is building that family engagement and also sharing with families about the benefits of bilingualism, and then also tools for what they can do at home to help support their child's home language. So thank you and congrats on the wonderful work that you guys are doing in Oakland. And then our next question is for Trisha. Trisha, can you please tell us a little bit about how your TK implementation is centering the needs of dual language learners, and also how professional development for teachers is playing a major role in that?
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me. Just want to give you a little background in our district and our evolution through this. We've had a strong partnership with SEAL for many years at our schools, and it kind of began in our pre-K classrooms that were on our SEAL campuses. They before I was in this role, but they started doing the SEAL implementation in our pre-K classrooms, in our state preschool classrooms on those campuses. So that had been going along that cohort for quite a while. And then we were started looking as a district, looking at co-teaching environments. And one of our campuses, our SEAL campuses, had state preschools on it, and it also had SAI self-contained classrooms on it. So there were conversations around that. So we started there with having last year having them be a co-taught classroom for that. So as those conversations were happening, our TK when TK started in our district, we onboarded with SEAL also. So all of our TK classrooms had been SEAL trained, but they were SEAL trained in the K6. And as we're looking at the expansion, looking at the ages of TKs going down, and the need for professional development for our current TK teachers, of knowing that the age range was going down for having more 4-year-olds in the classroom, and knowing that we've had these preschool teachers that have been using this age group and with SEAL strategies for success for a long time, we started planning how we could really make professional development powerful and get everyone in the same room that teaches the same age range of students. It was a very lofty goal, which we talked about for a couple of years, and things kind of aligned, and we pushed that alignment a little bit too, that this year we have a district-wide focus, PK through post-secondary, on English learners. The district-wide focus. So all of our PK students, whether they're SII, self-contained teachers, whether they're fee-based preschools, whether they're CSPPs, all of our TK students, veteran and new TK classrooms for our expansion, are going through the SEAL training this year. Throughout the year together, we had our first kickoff in August, and it was powerful. And the feedback that we got from all of our teachers was, this is the first time in a long time, some of them can remember, that all students, all teachers that teach that age range 3 to 5 were in a room together getting professional development targeted for early learning. And so that was a big win for us. They may have had it in different segments, but as a district, the power of having everybody in the same room together and the conversations was phenomenal. Yes, we do have hurdles with that professional development and coordination because there are different sectors and different unions and different calendars and stuff, but we made a commitment. So it's truly a collaboration with our professional development department, my department, our special ed department, our family child ed department that does our fee-based and CSVP preschools, that we were all committed as leaders to make this happen. And then the collaboration of the teachers on that day are the ones that, you know, at a school site, they can have a conversation because they're all talking the same language to support all of their DLL students and also all students. So it's kind of where we're at with that. So just, I think just being very thoughtful in your professional development and knowing that we had pockets, but how to align all those pockets of PD that was going under an umbrella of SEAL that we knew we were having success with and had a good partnership with. It was easy to onboard our teachers and excite them. We have our next professional development coming up here on October 21st. So there are some barriers in the follow up with our UDD days, if you're familiar with SEAL, but we're being creative and putting them into cohorts because we will have 11 TK classrooms and 38 PK classrooms that will all go through the SEAL training this year. So it's pretty exciting for that, but it's just, I would say from our stance is when it comes to professional development, something that all can be engaged in for that. And then we're also leveraging, I think Dean talked about it, like we're leveraging our teachers that have been SEAL trained for quite a while to help in those cohorts so they can be some teacher leadership around there and be part of that.
Wow.
So it's pretty exciting because it's been a long time talking about this professional development. Pandemic kind of put a little pause on it, but it's been exciting to kind of get the pieces together and the commitment because we saw that first preschool cohort be so strong and be so connected. And then they would go to other trainings that they would have their colleagues that weren't in that cohort and they were envious. So it's pretty exciting.
Well, thank you so much,
Sure.
Trisha. This is incredible work that you guys are doing. Love how you are bringing different programs together who are serving the same age range. How can we break down those silos and have everyone work together in the best interest of children? And then also love the P through third and beyond component. How can we really help support children along those trajectories? And again, breaking down those silos. So thank you for sharing your incredible work.
Thank you.
And then now we have a question for Darcy. So Westminster was the first to implement a Vietnamese dual language program, as well as the first to implement an infant and toddler Spanish dual language program. So we would love to hear your lessons learned from these, from putting together these programs, and then how that experience is helping you center the needs of dual language learners in your TK expansion.
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. So nice to be here with a group of people who just shares that passion for this learning at this age and, just helping these kids get the best start. Yeah, we've had an exciting journey here in Westminster, being the first Vietnamese dual to open in the state. And that really came about because as was touched on there, we do have families who are we want to send our children to school so they can learn English and we're not going to speak our home language anymore. But we also had a fair amount of families who were sending their kids to Saturday school to learn Vietnamese and to learn Vietnamese customs. And so we knew there was an interest in the community for this. And so that kind of spurred along this opening up of the Vietnamese dual language. It started with kindergarten, and a few years after that is when we added our TK and our preschool. And after some research, we felt that the 50-50 model was the best way to go for us because they're the kids are still learning their home language. It's not mastered yet while they're picking up another language. So we felt it was important for them to have that support in both languages as they were going forward. And so that's what we struck on there. Then a year later, we opened our Spanish infant toddler dual language immersion. And initially that was just, we're going to open an infant toddler program. That was the plan. We knew there was a need in the community to offer that kind of care, quality care. There weren't a lot of options for parents. And then we kind of felt that by then we had a Spanish dual language immersion program as well at one of the elementary sites. And we felt that this really makes sense to start our youngest kids in the program out with that language for the same reasons. We had parents who wanted their kids to learn their heritage language. We had parents who wanted their kids to learn a second language just to give them that, global advantage as they, went on through life. And we heavily promoted the biliteracy seal, and parents were very interested in that. And so, so that's kind of where we went with our infant toddler program, being the Spanish dual language immersion. And of course, it's been a hit. People love to bring their kids for that. But how all this has kind of affected TK in our district is TK has always been in our early education department, from 2009 when we called it Preppy K. They've always been with us. And so our teachers, our curriculum, our approach has always had that early learning slant to it. And so the lessons that we've learned with our dual language programs, with supporting those young learners in both languages as much as possible, has kind of spilled over even into English language TK classrooms, because the teachers understand they're still building the language, these kids who come to the class. And so when they can, they support in the home language if that's available, but they give them lots of opportunities for talking in the classroom. Even our TK classrooms have breakfast as part of the instructional day, and the teachers sit down, engage in conversation and authentic language use at the table with the kids. And so a lot of that has just come out of our experience with the dual programs, that the kids need to be able to talk as much as they can. And our job is to help support them, as they continue on learning that language. What else? Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Just, those are the main things we've learned. The challenges, of course, have always been finding the materials, especially with our Vietnamese program. We've had to give staff additional time to create curriculum or to just translate things that are available. So that's, some of the things that we've learned a little bit with that. And of course, educating parents, like we were hearing earlier, that you still have parents who think my child's going to school, so we're going to stop speaking our home language at home. And we continue to message to the parents that their home language needs to continue. You continue reading books or singing songs or chants or just conversation in that home language, that it's going to enhance their child's ability to learn and even pick up English as they go through school. So.
Thank you, Darcy. What amazing work, and just incredible, especially in the infant and toddler program, since we know how critical those first years of life are, not only for brain development, but for language development. So really taking advantage of that opportunity to help support children's bilingualism and cognitive and overall development. So thank you so much for sharing. And thank you all panelists for sharing all of your great work that you're doing. So we now wanted to open it up for questions. We have a few minutes for questions, so please include any questions that you have for our panelists in the chat, and then we'll answer them.
Hey, Carolyn, can I add one thing?
Yes,
I
please.
know Darcy mentioned it, but I had also meant to kind of mention that the curriculum piece is important. And finding a good curriculum. We experienced similar challenges with the Armenian and Chinese and the Korean dual language and finding materials. So we did work to, get things translated, but we also were able to tap into the Korean embassy, and since we've had some prior dual language programs, being able to take some of the kindergarten material, especially the songs and the chants, some of the large books, and then find them that way and kind of have to, and you always want to build from the ground up, but in this case, because some of the materials were already available in kinder, we're able to take some of those materials and adapt them for the preschool dual language or the early education dual language program. So the curriculum piece can be a little bit of a challenge. And then we found out that so many of the other programs that weren't doing dual language, so many of those strategies that we were using, the various SEAL strategies and things that we had kind of brought on board, we really adapted them and then did a whole series with all of our early education teachers on oral language development using some of those strategies. So I think there were ways to also add into that and really take advantage, of the assets that our kids bring to school at the earliest ages. So I just wanted to throw those couple things in there.
Thank you so much, Jean. Looks like people are slow to add questions.
So Carolyn, I do have one direct message. So I'll have,
Okay,
and then
great.
I have another question myself.
Okay, wonderful.
This is a question for Darcy. With what frequency did Westminster provide teacher teams with planning time? And any suggestions or guidance to districts who are planning on doing something similar?
So our DLI teams have, I believe it's 4 days over the summer that they get together for planning, and then they usually go to a conference every summer as well. And then throughout the school year, I think they have another additional 4 days that they're able to come together and do planning and have various types of training. And that's every year that they get that.
Does anybody else want to add to that on the panel?
I would like to just add that with our teachers, we have office hours. So we're doing a lot of just planning collaboration time. So the teacher collaboration is pre-K, TK at the moment, and they have 2 hours of planning time, and it's paid, right? We want teachers to get paid for all of the work that they're doing. And we have 7 dual immersion TK sites in OUSD. So those teachers are planning separate. Then we have all the TK teachers planning together. And then we have the pre-K TK teachers together. It's summer optional. And we are doing Saturday trainings now as well, but everything is paid. And we want to always make sure that there's enough time.
And for us in Santa Clara, our TK teachers, we have a new TK scheduled this year. We expanded our day, but they do get out a little bit earlier. So every other week they have we do an hour. It's within their work day that they come together and collaborate. And we just started them, but we have topics, and so we're embedding, and those are run by our SEAL coaches. Our SEAL coach for TK runs those. So some are logistic, but we really want to be that around the instructional strategies. But right now we're getting through some logistic stuff, but we want to have those. And then for our pre-K, they will have collaboration, like I said, as our UDD days, and those will be paid after hours.
And I'm just going to add one more thing. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bernadette.
I was just going to add that what we find, at least in our school sites, is that there's only one TK teacher compared to like 2 or 4 kindergarten teachers, or there's 3 first grade teachers. So we have strategically worked with admin to be like, TK teachers should not be going to school site PDs. They should be coming to our PLCs led by our coaches. And then we create this community. It's via Zoom at the moment. We're trying to do it more and more in person with a make and take space. So you have a laminator, you have all this great stuff for them to build and plan, but really building with admin to say the TK teachers are coming with us instead of learning about Eureka Math or benchmark or things like that.
So we're very similar. We bring all of the dual language, the early education dual language teachers together about 8 times a year. Because again, they're kind of isolated sometimes at their site. And so we bring them in. One day is for the teacher and the paraprofessional, and they work together on strategies. And so they may introduce 2 to 4 strategies in each session, but it's a full day. They have time to work and practice the strategies with one another. And then when we have additional 4 days of what we call unit development days, and over the last year, it's been about 4, but we would really like to get in 6, but it's to help them develop the materials. So it's kind of like a working session. And so very similar to what Dr. Pilar was sharing, was that we bring all the laminators, we bring the books, we bring the cutouts and the pictures, and give them time to put everything together for that upcoming unit. And then they can practice, if they're writing songs and chants, and they practice with their peers, and they develop the additional materials with their peers on those, we call them UDD days, but they're basically to put stuff together. And then at the end of each year, we do a summer bridge where, as the coaches observe, there may be something or strategy that's not very effective, or that we're not seeing used a great deal. And then we take a week in the summer. They work on, it's kind of like a lesson study. They develop a common lesson together, or common lessons together. And since our early ed centers are open year round, they practice delivering those lessons in other classrooms, and then give each other feedback. And so that happens a week in the summer. So there's a lot of pieces to kind of support, but it's that collaboration. And then they grow really tight together. So then they're willing to share with each other ideas.
And we also have a summer bridge component. And this year, our TK teachers did it with a preschool teacher this past summer. So, but that's because there's professional development in the afternoon. So they, it's a nice strategy to embed it.
Thanks. So we're actually at time, but there's one question I think that's really important to ask all of you, and that's about the funding piece, right? And so I think districts are getting money to put in TK programs, but we've heard a lot of reference to professional development, planning time together, coaches, job embedded coaches, right? So can you talk a little bit, just very briefly, about some of the ways you make sure that the funding is there to provide that full service support to your educators? I don't know who wants to take that.
So we've used Title II funding in the past to help to get subs when we can get subs. And then we've used, right now we're planning to use some of the Educator Effectiveness Grant money for those for the upcoming year. And then also looking at how we're using the UPK dollars, the learning grant money that's coming in, or the UPK expansion grant money that's coming in to develop those. And then when all else fails, then because we do serve a targeted student population, we will use some of our Lcap funding to go ahead and provide subs or professional development days for either the summer bridge or for if we do a training on the weekend.
Thanks. So Carolyn, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much to our amazing panelists for your time and sharing your experience and all just the amazing work that you're doing. So just want to thank you so much. And then now we're going to have an opportunity to move into some breakout groups so that you can reflect on what the panelists shared and how you can apply it to your own settings. So my colleague Allison is going to be dropping in the chat a document for you to take notes. And then we want you to reflect on the following questions. What are you currently doing to support dual language learners in your UPK, UTK expansion? And what did you learn from the panelists that you can apply locally to ensure that your UPK and UTK rollout in your local community is designed to really serve the needs of dual language learners? So we'll have a few minutes to come together in small groups to discuss those questions. So we'll be opening the breakout groups now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed the breakout room activity and that song. Thank you, Ian, for the amazing music. I am now excited to introduce Dr. Magali Lavandez and Dr. Elvira Armas, who will be presenting their report, In Search of Equity for English Learners, a review of the 2021-2024 local control and accountability plans. Magali and Elvira.
Thank you so much, Allison. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We are pleased to share with you the findings of our most recent report, and also to acknowledge the third author, Dr. Sylvia Jauregui-Hodge, who's not able to be here with us, and also to acknowledge the amazing partners and partnerships we've had. Many of you, some of you may have participated as reviewers, our Californians Together colleagues and organization helped facilitate and publish the report. And also, we are really thankful and appreciative of the foundations to help with the printing, graphics, layout, and also to the consortium who was really supportive of this facet as well. So we're going to share with you today our search for equity for English learners. In this slide, you'll see these are the procedures that we'll share with you. We're going to go rather quickly through the slides. We're going to identify and prioritize the findings, the key findings, the bright spots and the limitations. And then we're going to end with the recommendations at the state level, the local level, and the district level. And everything Vanessa said earlier, if you were here at the very beginning, about the goals of the consortium, about the values of the consortium, about building and supporting from the community-based organizations and engagement at the state and local policy level is really what we want to end with in this report. So it's really about how all of us work together to identify those priorities and action items during the latter part of our meeting this morning. So we want to highlight from you and recap the history very quickly of our history of our past reports. You may have participated in some of these convenings and some of our briefings about the issues. The retrospective that you see here is about the fourth report. It's been 13 years since Lcff. This is our fourth report. The first three reports, we really convened a similar process of developing the Lcap rubrics, and we did a retrospective analysis. We were most concerned in our report when the dashboard came about, our report that you see here in the top left, masking the focus on English learners, when the dashboard included the aggregate indicator for current English learners and reclassified English learners, that aggregate was masking the focus on English learners in the Lcaps, which is the LEA planning document and the mechanism for our accountability system. We developed the Lcap toolkit. We share the Lcap toolkit here with our consortium members and our community-based organizations, many who have taken it on and have a life of their own to really help engage in that process of developing equity-based practices, actions, and services for English learners. So historically, we found so many gaps, we found so many needs, and we found that the need of and strengths of English learners were not addressed in the Lcaps that we reviewed. And we had a call to action to sharpen the focus on for English learners, because we found little evidence in those 26 district LEAs that pointed to how LEAs were really engaging stakeholder groups to address the needs of English learners. We heard earlier that COVID has exacerbated the issues related to English learners, that the English learners subgroup is the group that has been most impacted, that we have yet to see how the long-term effects can be addressed. And we wanted to see that in this current report. We have seen in the past a need about transparency, about how we can really see through the Lcap, which is the public-facing accountability tool for supporting English learners through the local control funding formula, and how those funds follow the students, both the base funds, the supplemental funds, and the concentration funds. And as I said earlier, that aggregate definition has been historically through all of our reports a problem in really seeing how performance data through the dashboard for the academic indicator for English language arts and math has really clouded, masked the supports needed for English learners. In the next slide, you'll be able to see how the system is supposed to work. Our California accountability system is really based on these pillars of equity, performance, and continuous improvement. This slide really shows how the performance facet, the dashboard, really should inform Lcap processes by helping LEAs identify performance, how progress, and where the needs are. And the continuous improvement facet of our accountability system is really engaged through the system of support. So the visual that you see here on the right-hand side of the screen shows how the levels of support are available to the district, how districts are identified for the second level of support, which is the middle of that box inside that says differentiated assistance. And so how the trigger for differentiated assistance is based on the results of the dashboard. As just a recap, we know that the law requires Lcff to include community input, not just at the development of the Lcap itself, but also in the implementation, in the monitoring and the support, and how the system is supposed to cohere. It's supposed to be how the components of the system, the county offices, CCE, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, and the GLEs are supposed to all work together in support of the best needs of and interests of our students, and for our English learners, how we can really continue to monitor the progress across those metrics. On the next slide, you'll be able to see how in implementation of the dashboard and the accountability system, the next slide really should be able to show you how, I think the next slide might be stuck, but it is really triggering how the differentiated assistance is triggered. So it has the 8 state priority areas, and how those 8 state priority areas are really identifying assistance for each of the subgroups, and that in order to qualify for differentiated assistance, a particular subgroup must meet the criteria for differentiated assistance on the dashboard. Let me see, is the slide stuck or is it me? Oh no.
It's advanced on my end.
Oh, I cannot see it on my end. So I'll just follow on my end. Thank you, Elvira. So if you're all seeing the slide that has the criteria for differentiated assistance, then those criteria for English learners trigger how LEAs really address actions, programs, and services for English learners. We wanted to ask a set of questions that you may have heard before, and I'm hoping everybody else can see the rest of the slides too. No, Anya is not seeing it. Maybe we can stop sharing there we go. The next one, please. That was the slide on the system differentiated of assistance. And this is what we wanted to learn from our research question and from the 4 big areas of review that we engage in with our reviewers and with our scrutiny of these LCAPs. We wanted to see how districts with high percentages and high numbers of English learners by law described research-based programs for diverse types of English learners, how they identified and described their analysis based on how they looked at the metrics, how they looked at dashboard performance data, how they looked at local metrics to identify, reflect, monitor progress, and with the end in mind, how they identified where they wanted to see growth and how that growth was differentiated for English learners. So those were the desired outcomes. We wanted to see, we heard so much this morning about the importance of professional development programs. Again, we wanted to see the description of professional development for educators of English learners. And by educators of English learners, we meant teachers, but we also meant administrators and other groups. And we also wanted to see that community engagement, a requirement around families and about specific feedback to families and with families for English learners support. Our purpose then was to summarize those 5 areas, those 5 bullet points here is what were districts' descriptions of the language acquisition programs? These are the legal requirement. And how can they tell the program was working? A very important facet of it. It's not like the older times when the idea was you have a program, but you never monitored. So you keep doing the same thing over again, expecting to see different results. This is a very specific monitoring for program effectiveness requirement. Again, the professional development description. We wanted to see a comprehensive English language development, the definition of a comprehensive English language development program, how EL parents and stakeholder engagements were included, and we wanted to see differentiated growth targets for English learners, metrics to demonstrate how the gaps were closing, those achievement gaps in English language arts and math, and also we were looking for the progress on English language proficiency. So this is a timeline of the trajectory of Lcap requirements as enacted through Lcff legislation and the progress that we've made in our reports. We know that the COVID had an impact. It really paused the Lcaps with the suspension of in SB 98, but there were other requirements that you've seen in some of the reports that Californians Together has produced about the written operation report. Those analyses again showed significant gaps in how districts were addressing the needs of English learners, the school reopening plans, and the written reports. We also saw that the beginning, the shift from distance learning to hybrid learning also required districts to identify learning continuity and attendance plans in 2020. Again, a very wonderful and informative report, but again, shining the light on the fact that English learners we needed more transparency in that. And so it brings us today with our analysis of the current Lcaps 2021, 2022, 2024. So here is a slide that we have reconfigured. If you've seen our reports in the past, we've shown this also as a pie chart, but this is a different visualization of the English language arts academic indicator by English learners subgroup for those 26 districts that have high numbers and high percentages of English learners. On the left, you see the aggregate dashboard result. Right now, you can find the disaggregated information, but it's not the first slide you see. You have to go through a very detailed process of disaggregating the information on your own, so the dashboard does not reflect the second half of that slide, those second two sets of bar charts where it says current English learners and reclassified fluent English proficient students. So we see when we disaggregate the data that while we have a large number in yellow on the left-hand side, when we disaggregate for current English learner students, we see it says a very different story. And that's the main and the crux of the issue of the dashboard data. It does not really help districts identify current English learners. They have a lot of work to do in order to be able to do it for themselves. And that's one of the calls to actions that we've asked for since we began our reports. There's a question on the chart. This is the report, Leslie, that is in our current report. It's downloadable. You'll be able to see it and have access to it in the direct link. We'll post it again. This report is downloadable on the Californians Together website as well as our center's website. It's free in the digital format, but if you wish to have a hard copy, you can order them directly through Californians Together. This slide reflects the current Lpac scores, where we saw and we've seen many reports of really language loss. And because of the pandemic, we have not seen the kind of progress on English language proficiency for our English learners. So you see that the numbers in the lower levels have actually increased, and that's something that we have not seen in the past. Again, a data source that we were hoping that districts would look at, our 26 districts would look at in developing the current Lcaps. Let's see, is it working for the next slide? I think it's stuck again, but the next slide really speaks to what our process was, our process for review and analysis. And it really shows, if we can jump to the slide on the 26 sample districts. These are the districts that we selected. It was a purposeful sampling of districts across the state, across our geographic regions, from Northern California, the central part of the state, and Southern California. Again, high numbers and high percentages of English learners. 23 of the 26 districts were repeat districts from our previous 3 reports, and we added 3 new districts. Our process on the next slide was, how did we address the questions that we wanted to answer, the purposes of our report? And it really was a representation of how thoroughly we really wanted to engage in that process. So on page 13 of the report, if you're following it digitally, or if you happen to have the report, has our process. We engaged with Californians Together with 46 expert reviewers. We're again very thankful to those reviewers who were representative of many organizations, some of which are present here. We engaged those reviewers in a calibration process so that we would use our rubrics, and our rubrics are in the end of the report, but we also have our Lcap toolkit, which we had hoped that the LEAs would engage with prior to developing an Lcap. And that calibration process allowed us to make sure that everybody was looking for the same evidence and they were finding the same evidence, and they were using the tools, the rubrics themselves, to be able to rate the Lcaps. So we asked those 46 reviewers to engage in partnership. They rated at least one Lcap each, and they all found at least 3 sources of evidence. And then we completed the ratings, sent us the ratings, and then we engaged in the second part. On the next slide, you'll be able to see the second part of our review process. This is again our process, our methodology and approach to working on this was really a 3-tiered process. It really was as a result of do you want me to share my screen? Maybe I should share my screen. Let's see here. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I needed to have a verbal because I can't see anybody anymore. The Zoom gremlins are here. So before I get to the second part of the analysis process, this is about the rubrics and how we looked at the rubrics. And in our toolkit, what we did with those tools and resources, again, the rubrics are in the report as well, is that we identified and aligned the rubric with the California English Learner Roadmap. You'll see that in the blue bar. We aligned the rubric with the California state priorities, again, those 8 priorities that I mentioned earlier. And we had the rubrics for this report through 6 different areas. We did not do rubric number 7. We did the 6 rubrics that you see here in the green across those alignments and across the processes that we engaged with our reviewers. And those were allowing us to be able to look for the evidence in the Lcaps and to rate the evidence. Again, the rubrics themselves, if you look deeper, have categories within them that are research-based, and we had specific view and analysis and looking for evidence across each of these elements of the Lcap rubrics. And we then wanted to see how do those rubrics align to the kinds of questions and purposes that we were asking ourselves to find evidence for in those 26 districts. What was wonderful about the requirements of AB 1840 is that those advocacy efforts did lead to a strengthening of the language around transparency and the narrative around monitoring progress, about describing how they knew English learners and other student groups were really going to progress. But we looked at language acquisition programs. That's one main category. And the rubrics 1, 2, and 4 were what we used to answer the question, did we see LEAs, Lcaps that describe language acquisition programs? In the area of professional development, we had rubric number 5, a self-standing rubric for professional development. Again, these are research-based tools. Around stakeholder engagement, we had a specific rubric for that as well. And then about gap reduction, we looked at the rubric on desired outcomes for English learners. Our analysis process, I described just a minute ago about how our reviewers were calibrated and recorded their rater consensus scores for all of the 26 LEA Lcaps that we looked at. Then we calculated the ratings and percentages for those individual rubric focus areas. But then we went deeper because of the changes in the Lcap and AB 1840. We found and saw a lot of narrative data, descriptions, words that really described. So we engaged in this second phase, which is about qualitative analysis. We've compiled first the points of evidence that our reviewers found. And then we did an initial theme analysis using methodological tools and analyses to identify some bright spots for districts that scored on the rating scales of good or exemplary. We wanted to look at highlights. We had a lot of hope when we began this process that because of 1840, we would see a lot more evidence from the Lcaps, from the LEAs that have high numbers and high percentages of English learners, that we would find evidence. But we didn't stop at this level of analysis. We went to a deeper level analysis. So we did a second point of cross-checking for bright spots to be able to look at explicitly stated evidence of equity. Again, the title of this report is about In Search of Equity for English Learners. Then we created qualitative memos for each focus area. And then we mixed those results in phase 3. We used the quantitative ratings and the qualitative ratings to be able to triangulate the data to identify patterns and themes across districts. And here is what we found. I turn it over to my colleague, Elvira Armas.
Thank you, everyone. In the 10 minutes that we have left, we'll highlight some of the findings and then most importantly, underscore for you to be able to explore the recommendations at 3 different levels. So when we think about equity, we're all in this room because we're committed to equity, and we know that there are 3 facets to it: awareness, actualization, and then looking for achievement of results. So awareness of the inequities is what allowed us to really think about our funding in a different way. We as local actors can actualize equity, as are our district leaders actualizing equity. And the Lcap is the document that really concretizes that. It's the plan. It's the opportunity to really be able to uplift the differentiation of resources, which is part of the equity intent. And it also allows the documentation of really documenting the achievements by closing the gap. So we began by looking at where equity is intended. We looked for, are there specific goals for ELs or ELDs? And we found primarily that there were broad goals, usually under the areas of academic achievement or student performance or core curriculum. We found some examples of specific goals, as you'll see here, and you can look at them more thoroughly in the handouts that have been dropped in the chat for you. And then we found some examples of equity statements. We found a few districts that also signaled their English Learner Master Plan as a complementary document, in that it was part of their equity intent and their plan for that. We did uplift 4 specific findings, and they really are on the next slide. You'll see the overview of the findings. They really are around those 4 dimensions. 15 of you'll see the 4 categories that are uplifted in the AB 1840 requirements: language acquisition programs, professional development, stakeholder engagement, and EL gap reduction. Those were the 4 calls to districts to really think about how they include that in their Lcap. Well, overall, you can see that in terms of closing the gap, the desired outcomes, we had 81% of the Lcaps that we reviewed and rated with weak or no evidence. In terms of programs and services and course access, we had about half of the districts that had weak or no evidence, and others with promising practices. And in terms of whether it's doable, we did have 2 districts with ratings of good or exemplary. So it is possible. Those promising practices and bright spots that we uplifted, I'll highlight very briefly in the next few slides. On the next slide, you'll see that finding 1, with regard to differentiation for different types of English learners, we found that there was a more notable mention of LTALs and newcomer students specifically, but there were still limited descriptions of programs, actions, and services that truly respond to this differentiation. What did that look like? On the next slide, you'll see we quantified that with the rubric ratings. And as Magali mentioned, these rubrics are available for you at the end of our report so that you can see what some of the indicators are. You can think about how to ask the questions about the Lcaps in your context or the colleagues that you work with in designing actions and services for ELs. And then on the next slide, you'll see, well, what do some examples of bright spots for good or exemplary ratings look like? Well, as you can see from the bullets on the left-hand side, It's not just stipulating the population of English learners. In this case, the first bullet gives the example of level 4 at the Lpac and not yet reclassified, but it's also highlighting the specialized programs that are committed to rigor for this group of students to help bolster and accelerate language and literacy in these components. The second bullet speaks to providing specialized assessments for newcomers, and then there are some non-examples. In a similar pattern, the second finding really speaks to the opportunity to think about gap reduction. So on the next slide, what you see in terms of gap reduction is that we didn't see differentiated growth targets to close achievement gaps for English learners. What does that mean? We saw, I'll just jump to the qualitative components to show you this specific example. So I'll start with the non-example. In most cases, districts did identify gaps that existed, but they didn't identify targets that differentiated growth for English learners versus other students. And this chart on the left does do that. This is a district that highlighted baseline data, taking ownership and advocacy in their own space, but also differentiating desired outcomes for ELs. So that was an important opportunity to highlight examples, and you'll see more of that in our report. For the next finding, we highlight the opportunity to think about what we need to do to really uplift the value of our consortium, preparing educators to effectively serve English learners. And what we found is in Lcaps, while there was mention of preparation and professional learning, it primarily privileged focusing on content standards, not necessarily simultaneously really supporting educators and unpacking the English language development standards. And this slide gives us a sense of that. We overall had weak and no evidence ratings here, and we see some bright spots on the next slide that really highlight where there's an expectation for integrated and designated ED with explicit systems and resources. And you heard some of that in our panel this morning with our dual language learner focus that can be really great examples of how to align and cohere professional learning to develop educators of English learners. Our last finding really centered around stakeholder engagement. So those 4 pillars that we talked about and that responsibility to respond to AB 1840, we still found very conventional family engagement with reduced opportunities to co-empowerment. And if you have a chance to look at this rubric especially, it gives you a sense of where we found weak evidence of it. And on the next type of evidence that we would encourage to really highlight appropriate services, really uplifting parent liaisons and leadership positions, focusing on focus.
Oh, did we lose Elvira? We might have lost Elvira. So
Yes,
this,
I can't hear her.
you can hear her? No.
No, I cannot. Go ahead.
Okay, so let me just wrap this up. This final finding around family engagement and the idea of co-empowerment is something that is an implication for our community, our consortium, because it's not just providing, it's not only providing information to parents or providing parent liaisons, but how that connection between the home and the school can really strengthen educators' perspectives and relationships with parents, so they are also engaging with parents in meaningful and strong ways. So as I said, I was saying earlier, unfortunately, we were so hopeful in doing this analysis for this set of Lcap report that we were going to find more information, better evidence of supporting the needs of English learners, better ways that districts were describing as a result of those changes in the Lcap in 1840, we would be able to find more evidence. But it really, in essence, it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. As you saw Elvira describe about when we even looked at the word equity and when we looked at the application of the tools and the rubrics and the analysis and the deeper dives that we did, then we have an opportunity now to address the recommendations at the 3 levels. And you see here at the state level, our consortium is really going to engage in a next set of dialogue and opportunities to engage together to provide policy recommendations at the state, at the county, and at the district level. So these state level recommendations really about the need for better alignment, better coherence across our system of support, and to embed the English Learner Roadmap and to uplift the principles and elements in the roadmap in how our system works. The accountability system, against the recurring theme of discontinuing the aggregate English learner support. And also, we want to recognize that districts are able to reclassify English learner students, but we're seeing in this search for equity, we did not find evidence of the needs for English learner students were incorporated. We need a statewide English language development initiative. And we need to revise again, once again, the Lcap to be able to identify and target and ask districts to identify those differentiated growth targets that we saw, like in the model that Elvira shared with you. For county offices of education, we need to work together, again, as part of the system, as part of the geo leads, to be able to have expertise in the Lcap reviews so that the feedback to districts, to LEAs, to be able to provide greater evidence and description as required by law is present at that level to monitor and support those action and services for the differentiated assistance level, and to be able to do that implementation of the Lcap toolkit through the use of the toolkit, because we want districts to be able to do it proactively. And at the district level, and that's where many of your voices and engagement also takes place with our community-based organizational partners, is again, using those tools and resources to align the English Learner Master Plan and with the potential of an English Learner Master Plan with an Lcap, because the Lcap is broad and all the specifics may not be able to fit. But where we saw greater evidence, as Elvira mentioned, was where districts linked to their English Learner Master Plan for the articulation of those goals, action, and services, the differentiation of goals, metrics, and to better align with the strengths and needs of different profiles of English learners. And again, that need for a coherent professional development system so that the standards-based curricular professional development activities that are happening don't happen in the absence of the ELD standards. And believe it or not, even though the ELD standards are now 10 years old, there are districts who are still saying new ELD standards. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to reach out to us. We saw that the information is back there. I'll turn it back to Elvira. Any final words? No, I think there's.
Thank you. We look forward to hearing from you and engaging. And thanks for your patience. I'm at a school site and the internet is unstable here. Appreciate the opportunity to share the information.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Dr. Lavandez and Dr. Armas, for this great presentation. I have shared links to all the resources for everyone in the chat. I'll make sure to share them after the presentation, after the meeting as well. But just so you all have an idea, the Google Doc has links to the resources that Magali and Elvira shared with us. And then there's also additional links that will guide you to their previous reports and their current reports. So now we're going to take a break. We're going to give you guys some time, and we hope to see you back here at 10:55. And if you don't leave, we hope you enjoy the music. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I hope you all had a great break. I was keeping track of the comments in the chat, and yes, shout out to the DJ. I've been getting lots of messages also on my phone, and folks are asking who's the DJ and who is Ian. So Ian, it looks like lots of people are interested in this very amazing setup you got going for us. Thank you for that. So again, I hope you all enjoyed your break. We're gonna continue on into the rest of our agenda. We're going to move into the legislative updates. I am going to introduce you to both my colleagues who will be presenting on state and federal updates, but we will be starting with state updates before we move into our federal ones. So with us today, Shelly Spiegel Coleman from Californians Together will be presenting on our most recent state policy updates. And I will be dropping a link in the chat that will guide us to her resources as well.
Good afternoon. Oh, it's still morning. Good morning, everybody. So pleased to be with all of you. And what I want to do today is really talk about some of the items that were approved in the state budget. Now, some of the items in the state budget are specifically targeted for English learners, and I'll show you those. But there are a lot of funding in the state budget that we should be aware of, that at the local level or at the county level or at the district level, we should capture those funds to really build and enhance our programs for English learners. So I want you to be thinking about that when I go over some of the items from the state budget. There is literally millions of dollars out there for us to really think about grabbing and advocating for in terms of supporting English learners. There are a couple things, as I said, very targeted for us for English learners. We were very excited that in the final state budget, there was $20 million added to the Educator Workforce and Investment Grant. This is a program that was budgeted in the 2018 budget for 3 years to do two things. One, to implement the English Learner Roadmap, and the other was to really look at special education programs and services. So out of the $20 million for this allocation, this would be for an additional 3 years to extend that training. And to extend the training, we think probably $15 million will go to implementation of the EL roadmap and $5 million to special ed. We're waiting to see the RFPs, but we think that's the case. And what will happen, the eligible people for funding will be county offices or consortiums of county offices, and they're going to be asked to collaborate with the current state grantees. And so those are 2 state grantees. One of them are with Californians Together, our EL Rise grant, and the other is with CABE, the California Association for Bilingual Education, their MCAT grant. So we know now that we will be having a total of 6 years of funding for implementing the EL roadmap statewide, which is very exciting. The other piece that is also was a great addition in the state budget was $5 million that one of our organizations that's on the advisory committee Advancing Justice really took the lead on getting this $5 million in the state budget to support building the pipeline for Asian bilingual teachers through the current Asian Bilingual Teacher Consortium that's at Cal State Long Beach and Cal State Fullerton. What the consortium does is, you know, there's not enough aggregate of one language to mount a program at each university. So a specific Cal State would do for Vietnamese, one would do for Mandarin, so on and so forth. The classes are done virtually and teachers can participate within their own language, with their own target language. So there's money for the consortium. There's also money for the teacher candidates, for their books, for their tuition, so on and so forth. So if you're wanting to, if you have some candidates that you want to go get their bilingual authorization in Asian language, you should really contact Cal State Long Beach and Cal State Fullerton. There is other money, though, that is not specifically targeted for English learners that would help us build the bilingual teacher pipeline. There's something called the career pathway programs. And so this would be for building a one-time investment over 7 years for the development of secondary pathways. And you can see these pathways can be focused on different areas of work that students might want to do when they graduate. One of them look at is education, including early education. So we really think that districts ought to think about in high school creating a teacher prep, a bilingual teacher prep club, a bilingual teacher academy, so that these students are prepped for going into the bilingual teacher authorization programs when they graduate, and clearly targeting our students who earned the seal of biliteracy would be excellent for these career pathways. So those who are in districts with secondary programs ought to look to this funding for creating that kind of pathway. The teacher residency expansion. This is a program that has been in existence for now, I think, 2 or 3 years. This is a collaboration between school districts and an IHE that has a credentialing program. The school district applies in collaboration with a university, and there have been teacher residency programs in all of these different areas, but minimal teacher residency programs for bilingual teachers. So if you have the idea of collaborating with your local university and they have a bilingual authorization program, you can submit for funding to create a bilingual teacher residency program in your district. Something that we would love to see these programs multiply over the next few years. The other piece that's of interest to us is there's $85 million in the budget for professional development, pre-K through 12th grade, to implement the next generation science standards, the California Math Framework, the computer science standards, and the California Preschool Learning Foundations, which are being revised as we speak. In the language of this budget item, it does refer to that all of these professional development programs ought to support integrated ELD professional learning and the implementation of strategies to help English learners access this curriculum. So again, if that money is finding its way into your school district, we have to make sure that that is supporting our teachers who need professional development on how to provide access using integrated ELD methodology in the content areas. Again, a large amount of money. There's additional money that we think is in the budget that can be used to leverage the improvement of English learner outcomes. And so here they are. There's a Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant, which had $7.9 billion in the budget. And the grant goes to the LEAs. And it's to help establish learning recovery initiatives all the way through 27-28 school year. You can look at increasing instructional learning time, closing learning gaps, student support, so on and so forth. We think that there's a need for us and for you all when you receive those funds to look at how we're going to increase the accountability of the use of those funds to make sure that the students who have the highest needs are receiving the services from these grants. And so again, we would love for you to look at in your district, what is the district doing with their Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant for promoting and enhancing biliteracy, as well as a comprehensive ELD program, which would focus on designated and integrated ELD. This is a lot of money. And so again, money that we ought to capture to really do the kinds of things that we know need to happen for our students, especially keeping in mind the results of the report that Magali and Elvira shared with you before the break. The additional piece of money that's in the budget that's of interest is $3.6 billion. And this is really to deliver standards-aligned professional development and to look at high-quality instructional materials. Initially in the budget, before it was finalized, there was $200 million specifically to go to districts to purchase multicultural and multilingual books for school and classroom libraries. That was subsumed into this larger block grant. So again, as our panelists on the early childhood pre-K panel told us, that materials and the variety of languages that our students speak are hard to come by. This is money that you can use for really expanding both your classroom and your school libraries in terms of multilingual books and instructional materials. So again, finding out what is your district doing with this piece of this block grant is really something that would be a real benefit for our students. So here's the expanded learning opportunities. And I think, again, this is a large amount of money that's going to our school districts. 75, the schools have to service 75% or more of their students that have been designated as unduplicated students. Of course, that's English learners. English learners are one of the 4 unduplicated student subgroups. And so this expanded learning time can help expand programs, expand the time that students have in terms of their learning options, and it can include hiring literacy coaches. Now, literacy coaches can be biliteracy coaches, right? Again, something to think about. What kind of literacy coaches, if that's what the district is using the money for, are they hiring? Of really significance in this grant, they wrote that the money can be used to provide up to 3 days of staff development during regular program hours. So, you know, a lot of our teachers are really stressed and they feel like they're burnt out, and going to professional development after the school day, even if they're paid, is really a hard stretch. And so this block grant allows you to do that professional development during regular school time. Again, time to do high quality professional development when teachers are fresh and not tired. Another piece for us is where there's a lot of funding is California Community School Partnership Act, literally billions of dollars. Now, these community schools are not supposed to be regular programs that we have been offering just with wraparound services. That's how people are looking at some of the community school approach. The community schools should really be schools of innovation. And so we're hoping, again, that in your district, the districts have either gotten planning grants or they've got implementation grants. And so with the planning as well as the implementation grants, this is the perfect time to look at implementing bilingual programs, dual immersion programs, developmental bilingual programs, preschool through 12th grade. And so our community schools ought to be lighthouses for really uplifting the assets of our communities and their students. This is the perfect opportunity to have additional money for initiating and expanding your programs. So again, being on the committee that's working on these plans is really important. The last one I think that we're talking about is the Educator Effectiveness Block Grant. And these block grants go to districts, to county offices of education, and to charters. This grant is similar to what we had 3 years ago with the Bilingual Teacher Professional Development Grant. This is a grant where you really can identify possibly teachers in your school district who are bilingual but never got their authorization. Your paraprofessionals who are working on their teaching credentialing and you want to encourage them to get their bilingual authorization. This is a grant that really can help build the pipeline and shrink the shortage of bilingual teachers. And so again, in the language, it does talk about that this block grant should look at the integration of language development across the curriculum and can increase the capacity for bilingual and biliterate proficiencies of our students. The money from this grant, if you can see in red, can be used to help defer the costs of providing the professional development, of having our candidates get their bilingual authorization, attending professional learning opportunities, even travel and per diem reimbursements, and also substitute costs. So this is a large block grant, again, that really can be targeted for building the proficiency and the talents of our bilingual staff. There are a few pieces in the budget that can be used to uplift biliteracy and literacy. One is $250 million for literacy coaches and reading specialists. This is one-time funding over 5 years that would provide grants to high-need schools, again, to look at hiring and using literacy coaches and reading specialists. Now, This again should be by literacy coaches and by literacy reading specialists. You can use this to hire and then train those people with the expanded learning opportunity money that I referred to before, right? It can also be used to hire literacy coaches and to assist students with program enrichment activities. So it's our hope, as you said, that you would use these funds to support by literacy coaches, literacy coaches and reading specialists. Now, I think in the chat, I can't see the chat because the slides take up my whole screen, but in the chat, I think there's going to be a link to a blog on our website that lists all of these grants and all of their purposes. So you don't have to wait for our completed slides. This all is available on a blog on our website, and I think the link will probably be put in the chat. So, have I gone backwards? Wait, let me see. Yeah, the literacy coaches. Now, this is something that is for the universities and for teacher candidates in our school districts. There already is a reading and literacy supplemental authorization program at many of the CSUs and possible the UC campuses. But what this grant does, a participating teacher is eligible to get a $2,500 stipend to go to the university and become qualified as a reading and literacy specialist. So again, you might look at your local university and see if they are infusing the bilingual authorization piece into this reading and literacy supplemental authorization. So it's available for eligible sites with high unduplicated student percentages in kindergarten through 1st and 6th grade. And so this is a way, again, for getting training and authorization for those reading and literacy coaches that were funded in the previous documents, the previous budget lines that I shared with you. So now I just want to say about a couple of opportunities that we want to engage you in. Our State Board of Education has a student board member on it. Every year there's a new student board member. That student board member has a voice and a vote like any other board member. So they count when decisions are being made. Right now, the state board is accepting applications for next year's student board member. They need to be a junior this year. They need to apply by Friday, October 7th. And you can see the link where you can go to get more information on it. But we think it would be so great for those of you here who either are working in the community and can contact your local school district, those of you who are in a school district or county office and can contact school districts, to have a former English learner serve on the State Board of Education so that when policy questions come before the board, their voice about what it was that helped them or what it was that they needed help in terms of their academic and language growth during their trajectory in our public schools would be immensely valuable on our state board. So we would love for all of you to think about right now, who are you going to recruit to apply to be on the State Board of Education as a voting member, The last piece that I want to encourage all of you to consider is that the next state board meeting is scheduled for November 2nd, 2022, next month. The State Board of Education is going to be adopting a set of principles for the state data dashboard. Now, the principles that they're going to be adopting directly address some of the issues that were raised in our Lcap report that Elvira and Magali spoke to you about. We plan on having at least 10 to 20 people testifying at the state board in November, speaking to the principles that they're going to be adopting and calling attention to, if that principle were implemented, this is how we would have to adjust the accountability system for English learners. So we would love It only is the morning. It's virtual, so you would have to hold on to like 8:30 to noon on November 22nd. We have a prep meeting for anybody who wants to join us in providing testimony. Your testimony is literally 1 minute. They don't see who you are because you do it via telephone. In the prep meeting, we give you some of the words and some of the points that we want you to make in your 1 minute, and we're happy to coach you. So the people who have done it feel so excited about being part of a larger voice. You can imagine if just Californians Together or LMU or one of our organizations had 1 minute to say everything that needed to be said, we could not deliver to the board our powerful messages. But when we have 10, 15, or 20 people each taking an aspect of what we need to see for change by the state board, it's very, very powerful. So please, in the chat room, if you want to have this incredible experience to being a part of a large group with a strong voice, put your name in the chat room. We'll contact you for the prep meeting. And I know you're going to feel confident about raising your voices with us together. So with that, I think I'm done. Oh, and so what I would like to do is introduce my colleague, Amelia Chamorro from Unidos Us. We are so fortunate to have Amelia in DC representing Unidos Us and us, all of us, when it comes to federal issues. There is a very strong voice in Washington, and Amelia plays an exceptionally important part of that work. So Amelia, it's all yours.
Thank you, Shelley. And thank you so much for that information. I always also use this as an opportunity to kind of go deeper into what's happening in California and get a little bit more in the weeds on all the good work that you're all doing at the state level. I'm just going to provide a brief update on what's happening here in DC and how that also impacts the California landscape for the students that we are all advocating for. So next slide, please. So the first item that I wanted to just bring to your attention and provide you an update on, as I know it's something that is usually a running theme, the federal funding for English learners in Title III, which is the main federal funding source for EL. We have been working in the FY23 appropriations process with many of you as advocate partners throughout the year. And, you know, we're almost, I would say, in the last quarter of the push in the appropriations process. So many of you back in the spring in May signed on to a letter that we circulated calling for increased funding for Title III. The enacted amount last year was in FY22 was $831 million. That was at the national level, and California actually received about 156 million of that federal funding. California, because of the large number of ELs, received a big chunk of the federal funding for Title III. What's currently happening now and where we're at is that the House did approve its funding proposal for Title III at $1 billion, which is an increase over the current funding of 831. And that was after the president had proposed his own request of 1.1 billion. The Senate then came out with a little bit of a lower number, 954 million. So advocates at the federal level, including Unidos US, what we are currently pushing for is for Congress in its final appropriations bill that will be negotiated over the next couple of months, is to push for that 1 billion marker, because that would be the highest funding level to date and would really set an important milestone as we continue to push for our North Star, which is $2 billion, hopefully by the end of the Biden administration, and well, the end of his first term in a couple of years. And the targets, as negotiations continue, will really be focused on the leadership in both the House and the Senate. So the sign-on letter that we are currently circulating, and we'll be happy to share with all of you. Some of you may already have received it about a week and a half ago, is the House and Senate leadership. So that's Speaker Pelosi, Minority Leader McCarthy, Majority Leader Schumer, and Senate Minority Leader McConnell. Those will be the big targets because they're going to be negotiating the final numbers between the four of them. In terms of timing, we are aiming to send the letter to the Hill in the next couple of weeks. So we'll continue to update you so that we can garner more signatures. But just today, looks like the Senate has approved a continuing resolution, which what that means is that it's a tool that Congress uses to continue to fund the government to avoid a government shutdown, which has happened in the past. And it's really a way to buy a little bit more time until Congress can negotiate the final appropriations bill. And so they're waiting to see what's going to happen with the midterm elections in November, and then they'll continue to hash out the funding level and final appropriations bill. So given what's happened in the past, we foresee that it'll really be in December, and usually kind of leading up to the holidays when all the Congress members and their staff want to go home. That's usually when the final appropriations bill finally passes. But we're continuing to push for that higher number for this fiscal year. So would invite any of your organizations to join the sign-on letter. And I've included a link to the Google form here, but happy to also share the actual letter. And then the next slide, please. And then another big update, which some of you may or may not have heard about, is that we have some important staffing and leadership changes at the U.S. Department of Education and the Office of English Language Acquisition. So many of you have worked with in the past with a very strong ally of ours, Supreet Anand. She has left the department as of the end of August, so about a month ago. She was accepted into a very competitive program for senior executive development. And so she unfortunately left the department, but we do wish her the best of luck, and we'll continue to follow her career growth within this administration and future administrations. Unfortunately, that did leave a hole in the staffing of the department, and she has really been carrying the water for English learners over the last couple of years because an appointment had not yet been made for someone to head the office of OELA. So she had really been doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But with that, we have finally an appointment to fill the leadership role at OELA. Her name is Montserrat Garibay, and she has just been announced, I think it's on September 20th, as acting assistant deputy secretary and director of OELA. So she will be taking up the helm in the Office of English Language Acquisition. She is newer to DC. She had been in the role of senior liaison to Secretary Cardona in terms of labor relations. She is from Texas. She is a former undocumented immigrant from Mexico, very much has been a strong advocate for Dreamers, has been a bilingual pre-K teacher in Austin, where she served as a teacher there for 8 years. And she also held a leadership role as the first Latina secretary for the Merch Labor Union there. She is going to be transitioning to this role. It's not yet clear whether she's going to continue to hold the labor liaison position as well as head the office of OELA. But some of us have gotten to know her a little bit. We don't know her too well because she has been in more of a labor role within the department, but within the National EL Roundtable, which UNIDOS is a part of, as well as Californians Together and GABE, we are sending her a welcome letter and hope to schedule a meeting with her soon to just introduce ourselves and also start to develop a strong relationship with her on behalf English learners. So I included a link to the announcement where you can, from the Department of Education, where you can just read a little bit more about her background. But I would encourage you, if you have any connections with Montserrat, to also introduce her to the consortium. We can think about, and I'd be happy to help facilitate a future meeting with her, to introduce the consortium to the new leadership at OELA, and so that she gets to know also the great work that's happening in California, and to start develop that relationship as well. But with that, that pretty much wraps up my update. And in case anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer or take a look at the chat. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Amalia, for keeping us updated on everything that's happening in DC. I know we're just a little bit over time, but there was a lot of important things that came up here. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat so we can try to address them either here or at some other time, whether that's via email or directly. And then I'm not seeing any questions. I was going to answer one or two, but seeing none that are coming up right now, I'm going to hand it off to Vanessa, who will introduce this next section for us and tell us a little bit more about work groups.
Thank you, Allison. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Okay, wonderful. So thank you all. We are coming up to our last 30 minutes of the session. So we want to thank you for staying with us. I hope you have found the information to be beneficial. At the beginning of the day today, of the morning, we referenced the work groups and some of what some of how that is going to be part of the evolution of the consortium. I wanted to take some time to further talk about the purpose of the EL Consortium's work groups. Today, we're going to be splitting up into two. Everyone will have an opportunity to choose between the policy work group and the grassroots organizing work group. The grassroots organizing work group will discuss how to best engage partners, allies, people who can help to ensure that community voices are centered in these conversations. We want to be able to engage people that have shared experiences or that have been that have direct experiences either as an EL or DLL student, their parents, their caregivers, teachers, practitioners. We want to make sure that we're developing a space to uplift what is happening in the classroom and on the ground. Data is always important, but we know that stories resonate. And so stories that are highlighted by this work group are going to be very key in how we're mobilizing, how we are uplifting, and how we are moving forward together. Some of the questions that you'll be answering in this work group when you do the breakout group is going to be, what supports or information do you need to directly engage, or do you need to engage your base in the communities you work with? Another question that we'll be asking you to discuss is, we know that engagement looks different. Earlier, I talked about how participating in meetings with elected officials and decision makers can be one option, perhaps phone banking. Perhaps you can also engage through social media with the toolkits that we will provide to you. The engagement looks different depending on the role that you play. And so second question we would like you all to discuss is, how do you see yourself engaging when there is an opportunity to push at the state or local levels? And then there's the policy work group. The policy work group will convene to discuss, you guessed it, policy. The discussion is going to focus on openings and understandings of what your organizational policy priorities are. We want to be able to identify what opportunities there are at the Los Angeles County local level and where we might be able to work together. The work in these two groups will be coordinated by members of our advisory so that the policy conversations that are shared are to ensure that the policy conversations are shared with the organizing group and vice versa. We want to make sure that we're working in sync. That is going to be key to this next phase and iteration of how the consortium moves forward. I also wanted to share that external communications are going to be developed. The narratives and the messaging to those that are not part of this consortium will be essential, how we are reaching those audiences. And this again also means that we are uplifting the stories when we talk about the data and the possible policy solutions. So where you might not see yourself as developing a communication strategy, members of our advisory will lead that piece. You may see yourself as how you're sharing your experience and how you're sharing experiences that speak to the issues that we're addressing ultimately. So a couple of questions and prompt prompts for a second work group on policy will be, please share your organizational policy priorities. What are the openings that we can connect to opportunities at the LA County level? And what would be helpful to you for us to include in our regular policy updates? I'm seeing a note that my internet is stable, so Allison, please step in if I disconnect. As we mentioned earlier today, we do have 6 values that guide our work. So we make sure that we are working together to discuss what opportunities we have in the county and in California that align with these values. We hope that you'll all have an opportunity to connect with one another in a more direct way during these breakouts. We also hope that this space can develop into one that's outside of this quarterly meeting space. We know that there are many opportunities during the school year and the upcoming legislative cycle. So making sure that we can identify those opportunities of how we're working together to elevate the needs of ELs and DLLs is really key. With that, I will go ahead and have our Wizard of EL put you all in the self-select workout groups that you would like to jump into now.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We hope you enjoyed your time in the work groups. We are so grateful for your time with us this morning. I know that sitting in any meeting virtually takes lots of energy, but sitting in something that's longer than an hour takes lots and lots of energy. So we really appreciate your time. We appreciate you all staying with us to the very end. I realized earlier today that I was treating my role in this consortium as what I used to call, quote unquote, the voice at events, where like someone is just speaking, but there's no person to be seen, because I'm off video today because I'm very sick. But I was reminded by some of my colleagues that I didn't introduce myself to everyone, which is like such an awkward time to do the introduction as we're about to leave. But I want to make sure you all know who is speaking, so you all can reach out if you have any questions about what we talked about today or what we went through. So I'm Allison Osorio. I support all the groups you can see on the screen with just our goals and our values as we move along into this new iteration of the consortium. So as Vanessa mentioned earlier, we're super excited about what this next piece will look like as we incorporate more of our grassroots partners in our work. I wanted to share a few important dates with you all as we got ready to wrap up, and then provide some information about what's coming your way after this convening. So we are actually going to be meeting very soon, right around the corner on November 15th. So soon you'll receive a save the date from us and all the information you'll need for our large consortium meeting that will consist of a lot of the same folks you see here today. We know that you met in work groups today, and you all probably design and organize next steps with your group. So keep a lookout for your work group and their contact information, but I do have the date for the next organizing work group meeting, and that will take place on October 27th from 9 to 10 a.m. So I will take a look back at the notes and share calendar invites with folks who are interested in joining. Vanessa just dropped the information in the chat. And then in the follow-up email that you will receive from me, you'll get all the slides and all the materials you saw today. If there's anything that your organization would like to share in that email, I'm more than happy to share and include that in the folder that you all will have access to. And if you have any questions or want to be involved in the agenda or speak at our next consortium meeting or future consortium meetings, please feel free to reach out. And again, I will reach out to everyone via email tomorrow. So we are ending right on time. I want to thank you all. We hope you all are feeling energized and excited based off everything you heard, and motivated to make some changes given the presentations. And there's a lot of great things happening, and there's a lot of work that's left to do. And we know that all of you all are doing great work, but we hope that we can do that together. this year. So we'll be around for about a couple minutes if you all have any questions, but that is the official end of the program, and we look forward to seeing you all in November. Thank you all so much for joining us.